The 28th conference of parties on climate change gets underway today in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. President Cyril Ramaphosa will join other leaders at this gathering ahead of the COP28. Many countries around the world are grappling with the challenges of climate change. The conference will have to come up with solutions to address these challenges. For more on this, let's now speak to SABC International News Editor, Sophie Mokoena. Good morning. Thank you so much for making time. First, before we deal with the COP28 agenda, first of all, the breaking news that we woke up to this morning is the passing on of Henry Kissinger. What have we heard from Kerry?
Well, earlier on we spoke to the former Secretary of State, John Kerry, who is the envoy for President Biden in relation to issues related to climate change. And he spoke highly about Henry Kissinger, saying that he set a tone for foreign policy of the United States of America. You know that even though he was quite senior, he was recently in China. And you could see when he was in China, the relationship that he has with those countries. And also, I think this came months just before the president of China, Xi Jinping, visited the United States of America. You can see that behind the scenes, he was still playing a very important role. And therefore, the former Secretary of State, that is John Kerry, who is now the envoy for President Biden in relation to issues that are related to climate change, saying that he was a seasoned diplomat. That was his reaction to the passing on of this former senior U.S. diplomat.
And let's speak about COP28. What do we expect to be on the agenda? And also, how is South Africa going to convince the West that they should live up to the commitments that have been made in the previous COP summits in relation to the funding towards a just energy transition?
Well, you are correct, Aldrin. You know that the president has been vocal in terms of the implementation of particularly the Paris Agreement, and the Minister of Environmental Affairs from South Africa playing a prominent role in that team that was appointed by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in July to ensure that there's stock taking in terms of the implementations. So we expect the president tomorrow to continue with that message and hard talk in relation to the transformation of the multilateral institutions, but including the financial system, because to access money or funds or resources to move to a more greener and renewables in terms of energy supply, it is very difficult when you don't have funding, because you know that when you look at for example, electricity, the grid in South Africa, you have to change the grid to be compatible to the renewables. It is a lot of money. And I think the president is going to emphasize the fact that the developed nations, particularly the G7, those commitments made in Paris were not implemented in relation to the 100 billion. But yeah, we'll see what will be the outcome. The other important issue is the issue of loss and damage fund. How do you set up structures that will implement this decision that was taken at COP27 in Egypt last year? But also, Aldrin, we have many people here who are here from South Africa, business, who are part of this conference. And with me, I have Isha Mensing, who is the executive head, corporate affairs and sustainability at DP World, particularly in relation to logistics. You know, those trucks in the roads when coming to carbon emission, something that needs attention. And I'm going to be in conversation with her to tell us how the logistic industry is doing in relation to assist in the combat of those carbon emissions. Good afternoon, how are you?
Good afternoon, thank you so much for having me.
Your company is in the logistic sector. What role can this sector play in terms of reducing the carbon emission?
So we're very big in the logistics and port sector globally as DP World, and we have a critical role to play in the decarbonization of the transport sector particularly. But I think it's also more than that. It's more about, it's more than just electrification of vehicles, looking at alternative fuel, energy vehicles, etc. But it's also about how do we play our part in creating a sustainable and resilient supply chain. And I think that's also where we come in, because it's not just about us and reducing our emissions as a company, but it's also about how do we support our countries, our stakeholders and our partners to reduce carbon emissions across the supply chain. And I think that's where we can really add a lot of value. But I do want to emphasize that one company can't change or move the needle on our own. It is about public and private sector partnerships. We have been partnering with a lot of our other key stakeholders in the corporate sector, and we're really looking forward to how we can move the needle for the transport sector in South Africa together with government as well.
Earlier on, when I was talking to you about the political will to implement the decisions taken in previous meetings, you spoke about partnership. Governments can't do it alone. What role can companies play in assisting countries?
So I think firstly, every country has to play their part in decarbonization of themselves and having very stringent ESG and sustainability targets and strategies for their supply chain. Secondly, infrastructure development, or the lack thereof in South Africa and particularly other African countries, is a challenging factor when you want to move forward and really have a greener logistics supply chain. So I think we have a part to play there with government as well. We would also love to see more of the financial institutions in developed nations, but also in Africa, come to the party and play their part. If we really want to move the needle, we want to overcome a lot of our challenges, we do need funding as a country and as a continent. And I feel like, once we've got all the sectors aligned, all the private partnerships and institutional sectors aligned, I think we could really play go a long way in terms of our decarbonization strategy as Africa.
Thank you so much for your time. I know you have a meeting and the delegates are already waiting. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Business can play an important role in assisting countries. You heard it earlier on, Aldrin, but also in relation to the political will, we expect the UN Secretary General to emphasize that issue. You can see behind me here, this is the office where the COP president is, and also the outgoing COP president, and of course we expect Antonio Guterres to arrive later today, but now in few minutes time it will be the opening of COP28, particularly with negotiators and the president of COP, that is the United Arab Emirates.